What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
Slap.
What the hell was that?
Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
Okay, here we are again with Bowen on the Birds, and I am Les Bowen, as you might have intuited. We're finally at the opening week of the NFL season, and the Eagles are traveling to the Patriots for the opener, which is something I haven't witnessed previously. I know it hasn't been done this century. I don't know if it was done before that, having the Patriots as an opening opponent. At any rate, it's going to be a fascinating matchup, and I have Ben Volin from the Boston Globe for a limited time only. And let's get him up here so we can talk to him. There he is, yes, from Foxborough.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm great, Ben. It's good to see you.
Likewise, man. This will be a fun matchup. Yeah, I don't know if Eagles and Patriots have ever played in week one, but I do remember the last time they came to Foxborough in 2015 was that really weird game where the Patriots, I want to say they were 10-0 or 10-1, and they had Nate Ebner doing mortar kicks on the kickoffs, and the Eagles scored on like a punt return and an interception return.
Yes.
And they
Jenkins. Yeah.
Overcame a 14-0 deficit to pull off this shocking win over the Patriots, which honestly kind of portended doom for the Patriots the rest of the season. 2015 was one of the years they didn't get to the Super Bowl. So, and then, of course, there's the Super Bowl from a few years after that. So
there was that, yes. But that 2015 game was fascinating because the Eagles were coming off a Thanksgiving loss at Detroit that was just horrific. I believe the final score was 44-15. It was the kind of game where you look for the owner after the game because you're pretty sure some of the players have quit on the coach and the owner isn't anywhere around. I remember very distinctly Tim McManus and I scurrying around the stadium there in Detroit trying to find Jeffrey Lurie. We never did. But, Chip Kelly got fired despite beating the Patriots. He did not end up having a good year. And, that was a strange one. And the Super Bowl also a strange one, but a very entertaining one, I think, from both sides. Of course, the Patriots then became the most recent team to lose the Super Bowl and then win it the next year. And that's something that Eagles fans are very interested in hearing about. That's the biggest thing here, I think, is, everybody agrees the Eagles have a great roster. Especially for an NFC team, they're not trying to get past the Chiefs and teams like that to get to the top of the conference. But there's this tradition of, nobody but New England ever gets back to the Super Bowl right away or wins the Super Bowl right away. I think the last NFC team to do that, to get to the Super Bowl the year after losing it, was the Vikings in 1974. You were there covering this stuff. What is important? What gets a team back to the Super Bowl after that long slog, and then it doesn't pay off, and you're not, you didn't win it, and you're going back up for another try? How do you get there?
Number one is you have Tom Brady. I think that's a really important part of it. Tom Brady helped the Patriots. That run, they went to 3 straight. They won it in 16 against the Falcons, lost it in 17 to the Eagles, and then got back in 18 and beat the Rams. And that was an interesting season for the Patriots. That was not a team that looked like it was going to win the Super Bowl. They had I want to say they had a bad loss to the Steelers in December that year that dropped them to like 9-5. Brady was very frustrated. The offense had kind of hit a little bit of a wall towards the end of the season. Some injuries had hit. And they figured out some things in the final 2 games of the season against, I think, like the Bills and the Jets, who back then weren't very good. Right. And so they finished 11-5. They had the 2 seed, but they were not looking like a team that was going to win it all. And they found their stride in January, and they just got hot at the right time. They had an epic win over the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, and then a really boring win over the Rams in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was.
They had a great defense that year. They limited the Rams to 3 points in that Super Bowl. So I think that's an area where the Eagles are set up well. Obviously, adding the 2 first-round picks. Losing Javon Hargrave will be tough, but you've got to really like the personnel the Eagles have on defense and what they bring back on that side. You got to love, I said it tongue in cheek with Brady, but you got to love the leadership that Jalen Hurts brings, the player that he's developed into now in his young career. I mean, the Eagles just talk about hitting a home run with that guy, and he's everything you could want. Out of your franchise leader, the Eagles are stacked. It really feels like the only thing that could stand in their way are injuries. And, once you get to the NFC Championship game, who knows? But this definitely seems like a team that is built to handle the pressure of getting back this year.
Good points. Yes. Speaking of Tom Brady, as you were, I've never been a big hot take guy, but podcasting is a bit of a hot take profession. So I've got this, they have me come up with this agree or disagree every week. And my agree or disagree this week is that without Tom Brady, Bill Belichick is just another grumpy old coach. Now, I'm not going to go hard in on agreeing with that, but I want to get your take. I know that's been a topic of conversation around Boston. The Patriots are 25-25 since Brady left. What do you think?
Yeah, it's the conversation that never ends. And frankly, I think Brady has kind of settled a lot of it by going right to Tampa, winning the Super Bowl in his first year with the Bucs, totally turning that franchise around just with his presence alone. And I think the Patriots' performance too. I mean, they've been as you said, 25-25, a pretty middling franchise. And really, the games that they win are against like the rookie quarterbacks and the backup quarterbacks when they have to play real teams. Like the Buffalo Bills have destroyed them the last 3 years. And who knows where the Patriots are going to fall this year, of course. Belichick has even said it. It's a player's game. And you're a genius when you have Tom Brady and Gronk, and you're much less so when you don't. That said, I mean, we've seen a lot of teams have talent, and it very rarely stays together for more than a few years. The Seahawks, they lost that Super Bowl to the Patriots.
Absolutely.
Completely melted down as a franchise, even though they're insanely talented. I mean, the Patriots and Belichick kept together for 19 years, which is just an unbelievable streak for them. 16 division titles, 9 Super Bowls for them, 9 Super Bowl appearances, 19 years. That just unheard of level.
Well, Belichick is 30 wins behind Don Shula, which is kind of like being a handful of games behind Cal Ripken or something. I mean, it's just unimaginable, in this era. That Shula was another era, frankly. It wasn't even this century. The league has changed so much. The game has changed so much. Free agency, all the things that, it's incredible what he's done. And one of it probably was Brady, but I also think, he's been an innovator. He's been, a guy that I know 10, 15 years ago, we used to always consider him to be on the cutting edge of things. Now, that's the one thing that I think might be missing these days. It's just doesn't seem like his teams are giving you something, that's innovative or different or anything like that. How do you see that?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. The last 3 years, especially, it's been very boring football, especially on offense. Cam Newton and Mac Jones. Last year's experiment with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge running the offense was a head scratcher to us on the outside, and apparently on the inside, not many players were very happy with the setup. Belichick the Patriots were always known for being 2 steps ahead of their opponent. And now last year, they're losing games like that Raiders game, where they're throwing laterals across the field and the defense is returning it for the touchdown, or Ramondre Stevenson fumbling on the 5-yard line to lose to the Bengals. They were one of the worst teams in penalties, one of the worst teams in red zone. And frankly, I think it's another example of how important Tom Brady was like as the coach and the general on the field of getting guys buttoned up and situational football. And that part is all definitely slipped for Belichick. And I think this year's Patriots team has a lot to prove as far as just discipline and things that Patriots you never had to question them about. So that's definitely something that has to be proven this year. And Belichick, the way I view the whole dynasty thing, I think Belichick was maybe more responsible for the early part of the dynasty when Brady was just coming into the league. And I give Brady a lot of the credit for the second half of the dynasty, but not many coaches, I think, could have kept the whole operation together for 2 decades, the way that Belichick did.
Yes, I agree. Well, we met Patricia. That's a big topic in both cities this week. Frankly, here in Philly, I think people had kind of forgotten he was here for a while. It was a big deal when they hired him because he had a terrible relationship in Detroit with Darius Slay, who's kind of a big deal on this team, and people were like, they're going to bring in this guy that Darius Slay hates, but it apparently that's been worked out ostensibly anyway. Patricia is here. It's not clear what he does. Sean Desai is the defensive coordinator. He's giving advice. I think Nick Sirianni is still, in terms of time in the league, I think Sirianni is still a young coach. And I think somebody like Matt Patricia can kind of be whispering in his ear, but there's a lot of speculation about what Patricia's effect will be on the game this week. And I can't quantify one. Can you?
I do think that stuff can be a little overrated. That said, Matt Patricia, when he was head coach of the Lions, they played the Patriots. I think it was week 3 of that 2018 season that the Patriots won the Super Bowl, and he smoked the Patriots. It was like 26-10, and the Patriots offense did nothing that game. Gained like 100-something yards. So, and that's been a common thread for Belichick's disciples the last few years. He's lost to them all. I mean, he got smoked by Bill O'Brien a couple of years ago. He lost to Josh McDaniels. He's been losing. Brian Flores has beaten him a few times. So having that knowledge of the Patriots has helped. And Matt Patricia certainly knows Mac Jones's strengths and weaknesses and can help Sean Desai with some of the game planning there. And he probably pretty intimately knows the strengths and weaknesses of all 5 offensive linemen. And, hey, we can catch, the right guard on a twist sometimes, or he gets his feet twisted up when you do this to him. I mean, he does have intimate knowledge of stuff. So it seems to me that Nick Sirianni brought Matt Patricia in. It's kind of a favor. I think Howie Roseman maybe did Patricia a favor. I know Matt Patricia, he's got a family with young kids and I don't know if he moved them from New England. I know he didn't really want to keep moving his family around, which is something we can all understand.
Oh, yeah.
So I think Philadelphia worked out for him that way. But I think he's just kind of given a corner office, and Sirianni pops over and is like, hey, what do you got for us today? Or, hey, what would Belichick do in this situation? Because I think Sirianni has said he's been pretty intrigued by Belichick and all that. So I think it's Patricia is just another resource for them. And for him, it's a way to stay in the game until he can maybe figure out what his next move is.
That makes sense. Well, Ben, we're going to go to a very quick commercial here, and I know you're pressed for time, but I hope to bring you back for just a few minutes on the other side of the commercial, if you don't mind.
Definitely, Les. Sounds good.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years, and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
Hey, we're back, and there's Ben. Yes, we'll have him for a few more minutes here. This is Bowen on the Birds, and that's Ben Volin, who is one of the more, I think, perceptive and insightful writers in the NFL. I'm not saying that just because he's sitting here doing our podcast. I try to read Ben, especially on Sundays. I think he does a really good job. The that thing's going away. The whole Sunday, the Sunday column thing. You're one of the last purveyors of that, and I really like it.
Thank you. I'm fortunate to work at a place like the Globe that still invests in that. Les, I hate to say this.
You got to go.
Patriots locker room just opened 15 minutes.
Okay.
I got to go.
I know you got to go, and I'll be all right without you. But thanks very much for doing this, and have a good time this weekend.
Thanks. Yeah, the Patriots Eagles should be a fantastic game on Sunday. Hope you enjoy it.
Yes. So that was Ben Volin from the Boston Globe. We'd hoped to have him for a few more minutes, but we don't. So they opened up the locker room up there in Foxborough, and that's one of the things about being a reporter is when they open the locker room, you must go. I was going to ask Ben. We'll just sort of pretend that Ben's still here, and we'll talk about the things that I was going to talk about with Ben. About Matt Patricia and a sort of similar situation here with Jonathan Gannon. Obviously, you know that Jonathan Gannon was the defensive coordinator here who's now the head coach in Arizona. And there's a lot of feeling in the fan base that the Eagles are better off because people didn't really like Jonathan Gannon's methods or his manner. And the Super Bowl kind of brought all that to the head, a 38-35 loss in which his defense got no stops in the second half whatsoever. Meanwhile, Matt Patricia last year was the Patriots offensive coordinator. Even though his background is defense, he did have that brief interlude as the head coach of the Detroit Lions. So you could say he had some offensive experience from that, but really he had an offensive coordinator. Everyone assumed that he was mostly focused on the defense there. So last year he was the offensive coordinator. It was a disaster. Mac Jones went backward from his rookie year, the quarterback. The Patriots struggled to score points. Their offense was very undynamic. There wasn't much to it. They really didn't have great weapons. They didn't have a very good O-line. There was nothing with play design or anything like that really got anybody's attention or seemed fun or interesting. And so in New England, much as some fans here in Philly are figuring that the defense will be better without Jonathan Gannon, there are a lot of people in New England who think the Patriots offense has to be better just because Bill O'Brien, the former Penn State coach and former Houston Texans coach, is now the offensive coordinator instead of Matt Patricia. And that's an interesting thing. It's probably right. I mean, I've read a lot of stuff in the training camp from Patriots players who are saying, you know, that Patricia was terrible and that was a big part of their struggles last year. So, you know, though he might be able to tell Nick Sirianni a few things about Bill Belichick and his proclivities, I don't think having Matt Patricia on the Eagles staff is going to be something that very many Patriots fans mourn as we prepare for this weekend's game. Openers are funny. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about today. Neither team has seen the other in regular season action in this season. There are always changes in scheme, changes in personnel, changes in emphasis, and you just don't – the preseason anymore, nobody shows anything. The Eagles didn't even play any of their starters. So both teams kind of come in with a blank slate, and if you have a situation like the Eagles have where you didn't play the starters in the preseason, you wonder how sharp guys are going to be and what timing is going to be like and whether there will be mistakes and turnovers and blown assignments that could mitigate and add an advantage in talent that I think everyone believes the Eagles have in this game. They're favored by like 4.5 points on the road in Foxborough, which used to be a very daunting place to play. I've covered a lot of openers. The Eagles generally do well in openers. They're 14-6 in their last 20 openers. I think they've won 8 of their last 10 and 6 of their last 7. Interestingly, when they lose openers, it tends to be a very big deal lately. The last two openers they lost were 2015 and 2020. And those dates are significant because both of those years, the head coach ended up getting fired. He didn't get fired for losing the opener, obviously, but both Chip Kelly and Doug Peterson lost their openers in 2015 and in 2020. And, it was a portent of things to come. So I don't think that'll be the case for Nick Sirianni, even if the Eagles lay a giant egg, the biggest egg in history up in Foxborough. I think Nick's job is probably pretty safe, but that's the history anyway. Oh, we have a guy here, Greg, who disagrees with the poll. Yeah, I think he's a good coach. I mean, I would not say that he's just another coach without Brady. I do think, however, time waits for nobody. And the Bill Belichick of 20 years ago isn't the Bill Belichick you have today. And I'd be kind of concerned about that if I were New England. Is he going to lead them to another long run of glory at his age? He's even older than I am. Think about that for a minute. It's just he's got this quarterback, Mac Jones. Nobody knows if Mac Jones is really good. As a rookie, it looked like, he kind of gave off some Jalen Hurts type vibes, a guy who was a little bit under the radar in college. Although he was a first-round pick, he certainly wasn't the first quarterback picked in his draft. Jones was not. But he had pretty good stats his rookie year. And then last year, he just took a huge nosedive, 14 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, a lot of bad decisions, a lot of bad games. Can Belichick mold him into something? He's not going to mold him into Tom Brady. I feel pretty secure in saying that. But is he going to make him into a guy that can take them to the Super Bowl? And I don't know. I kind of don't see it, I don't think. And to start over with another quarterback at Bill's age, it would be very, very interesting. And I'm not sure he has the patience for that. So, it's going to be a heck of a year, I think, in New England. That's going to kind of set the tone. I don't think Bill Belichick loses his job. He's kind of in one of those situations where you have to let him decide when he's done, maybe. But they need to be better. They were 8-9 last season. People there aren't used to that. There is a lot of grumbling. You would think, guy wins 6 Super Bowls, that people would be sort of like, oh, things aren't as good as they were, but we have these 6 parades, and we're not going to get too excited about not being good. Au contraire, in Boston, they're excited. They're really very, very upset over the way the last few years have gone. And Brady winning a Super Bowl in Tampa was really set that whole discussion on fire, I think, up in New England about Belichick and his future and where the Patriots are headed. And they really have to do something this year. And the AFC East is so much better than it was during much of the Patriots dynasty. Miami's good. Buffalo's good. The Jets, there are people picking the Jets to go to the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Belichick has ever navigated waters like that in his entire tenure with the Patriots. So that'll be really interesting. Irrespective of whether he's improved his team, the easy wins just aren't going to be there for them. And that's something that the Eagles are going to face as well. I think everybody knows their schedule lines up much tougher this year than it did last year. That's why I picked the Eagles at about 12-5 this year. And it's not because I expect them to be worse than they were last year when they were 14-3. It's because I think the schedule is so much harder that they can be a better team and not win as many games. And I think the margin for error will be much slimmer. There were some games last year where they kind of muddled their way through, got past teams that they should have put away. I don't think they're going to have that luxury this year. I think they're going to need to be on point. And I think they understand that from everything I've heard from listening to Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni and other leaders of the Eagles, I think they know that this is going to have to be, when you're a defending conference champion, there's a big spotlight on you. Great things are expected. It's very, very different from last year at this time, and they need to be on point, and they need to get some wins early in the season because the back half of their schedule is very daunting. And you don't want to just sort of muddle through the first half of the schedule and then have to beat a bunch of really good teams all in a row down the stretch. You want to create some distance, create a cushion for yourself. And that starts this weekend in Foxborough, frankly, with a game that the Eagles should win. Then you got to play 4 nights later at home against a good Vikings team. And, the Eagles have handled the Vikings lately. Last year, certainly they did. It is a night game, and Kirk Cousins in night games is something opposing defenses seem to really relish. I don't think it's a rule, though, that he has to suck in night games. I think it's conceivable he could play well. So you want to win this opener. You've got a tough conference game 4 days later. You don't want to go into that 0-1. I think you want to get out there and really put some points on the board, which I think the Patriots would have trouble matching if the Eagles were to get some early scores. I don't think this is going to be a real high-scoring Patriots offense. The thing you have to watch, I think, is the Patriots running game and the RPOs. They're not going to Bill Belichick is smart. He's not going to have Mac Jones drop back 40 times. And in the face of the Eagles pass rush with a banged-up offensive line, the guy that he thought was going to be his starting right tackle, Riley Reif, is out. There are a couple different situations on that line. They weren't able to get that line together during the preseason. Had he wanted to play, his line in a preseason game, he couldn't have because they weren't all healthy. So, I think the Eagles need to stop the run, which they couldn't do in the Super Bowl. And they need to score some points early and get ahead and kind of, make the Patriots one-dimensional. And they shouldn't have too much trouble if they can do those things. But it never works out quite as simple as it looks on paper, it seems like. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. It's an unusual opener against an AFC team on the road, a team that you don't have a huge history against, excepting the Super Bowl, of course. They're going to honor Tom Brady at halftime, by the way, of this game. And that kind of will be a big deal up there in New England, I guess. I don't think it'll affect the game very much. I think if they give Brady some sort of trophy or something, I think they should have Brandon Graham run out and try to swipe it from his hands. But I doubt they'll take my advice and do that. And here, Michael, one of our viewers, listeners, disagrees with the poll. Okay. Nobody wants to agree. Nobody wants to agree that Bill is just another old guy without Tom Brady. And that's all right. I don't really believe that myself, but it's possible. And it's a fun thing to contemplate. We're going to have Sheil Kapadia coming up here pretty soon on Bowen on the Birds. Sheil writes now for The Ringer, and he's been with a variety of outlets. And he's really on the cutting edge of a lot of stuff in journalism today. And I'm interested, being far away from that cutting edge myself, I'm very interested in getting his opinion on several of those types of issues. We're going to go to another commercial here in just a second. And I hope on the other side of that we'll have Sheil, but we'll see.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
All righty, here we are for the second half of Bowen on the Birds, courtesy of A2D. And I'm ready to welcome a very special guest, Sheil Kapadia from The Ringer. He's going to tell us what The Ringer is first, and then he's going to, give us some insight into this week's game, the opener of the Eagles and the Patriots in Foxborough. And there he is with a very patriotic background today. How you doing, Sheil?
Doing well, Les. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Good to be seen. So you've gone from The Athletic to The Ringer. Tell us about The Ringer. What kind of a platform is that for you? What do you do there?
Yeah, The Ringer is owned by Spotify. So they're kind of a audio first type company. Podcast network is sort of the core, at least as I understand it. As you know, sometimes we work for these companies and we're not totally sure, but I think it's more audio focused, which I kind of wanted to try my hand at that after working at The Athletic. So I do a Philly special pod where we talk about the Eagles and other Philadelphia teams. And then I do a Ringer NFL show where we talk about league-wide NFL stuff twice a week. And I still do write. So I write about once a week for most of the season.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was reading something you wrote the other day, and I always look to you as someone who grew up in the Paleolithic era before all of these stats that we have now. And I don't dislike them, but I didn't come up with them. I have to really kind of sometimes struggle to understand exactly what's important and what isn't. And you're one of the people I look to tell me, this is an important stat that I haven't really considered very much. I was looking, you were writing about, it was a next gen stat, completions percentage above expectation. And this was interesting to me because my question is, who's doing the expecting? Is there a template for this? I mean, how do you quantify something like that and not make it really subjective?
Yeah, so they actually use those tracking devices, Les, that the players wear on their shoulder pads. And so, like you said, you always have to try to contextualize these things. I try to not just, use one and say, it says this is exactly what's happening. Try to just use it as kind of a piece of the puzzle. And so what they do is using those tracking devices on every player that they have in an NFL game, they can say, all right, the quarterback had to throw the ball 27 yards to the left sideline, and there was a cornerback who was within a yard of the wide receiver, and there was pressure on the quarterback. We have, 400 examples of this type of pass. How many times was it completed? And so they kind of set a baseline there. And so it's just, to me, it's a little, I don't even know if it's better. It's kind of another one to use because you could have, complete 70% of your passes, and they could all be 2 yards down, 2-yard check downs to the running back, whereas another quarterback is really pushing the ball aggressively downfield, and he's completing 62% of his passes. Well, is the first guy more accurate than the second guy? Not necessarily. So I like to look at, whenever I'm doing it, 3 or 4 of those things and say, all right, is there a common theme? And I think in that one, I was looking at Jalen Hurts actually and looking at, all right, here's 3 different sort of stats. And you know what? I think he's probably a more accurate quarterback than he typically gets credit for. So that's just kind of the idea behind that one specifically.
Yeah, and I agreed with you on your point with Jalen. I think that's certainly the case. But let's get to a meatier topic here that I think will engage fans a little more. Jonathan Gannon. You had a very good rant the other day about Jonathan Gannon that I happened to watch. And then we have, in the wake of that, this piece in The Athletic that has drawn a lot of scrutiny. There are several points in there. One is Jonathan takes credit for Nick Sirianni, giving Nick Sirianni the idea to hand play calling over to Shane Steichen in 2021, which I kind of rolled my eyes at. But more critically, the 2 touchdowns that were more or less identical on opposite sides of the field in the Super Bowl, one of them, Gannon seemed to be just saying, well, the player screwed up. Nothing I can do about that. The other was even more, to me, perfidious in that he says, well, when I looked at what the defensive backs coach did there, I thought he did what I probably would have done. What the hell is that? You're the defensive coordinator. It's separating himself from, he agrees it was a bad call, but somehow it wasn't his bad call. Neither of these things seems at all acceptable to me. The last one, for what I just went through, the first one, you're the coach of the player. If the player doesn't do it right, that doesn't mean that you're just, player didn't do it right. Hey, I told him what to do. No, that's not what coaching is. There are 1,000 people that can tell a player what he needs to do against a certain set. But a good coach, the player actually does it in that moment, Right. And if he doesn't, then that reflects on you. I'm sorry. It's not just, we did it right a bunch of other times. No. So anyway, how did all this hit you, Sheil?
Yeah, it was an excellent piece by Zach Kiefer. Les, I feel like for people like us, I thought it was a great journalism lesson where it's like, if your subject is kind of doing all the work, don't overwrite it. Just, let him tell the stories and go there. So, I thought it was just sort of a jaw-dropping article. I thought Jonathan Gannon would go to Arizona. They're kind of an irrelevant team this year. We wouldn't, we wouldn't really hear. He didn't say anything interesting in 2 years in Philadelphia, as far as I could tell. And so I thought, all right, he'd go over there. The team's probably going to be bad. Who cares? We'll see what happens. I didn't think he's become a main figure in the NFL this offseason. You can't go more than a few days, more than a few weeks without hearing something about him. And so I think your coaching point is right on. Whenever a coach says the players didn't execute, that's a red flag. I was listening to a Mike Tomlin interview last offseason, and I thought he was just explaining his understanding of what an NFL head coach actually is better than anyone I've ever heard. And the basic point is, what's the first line of an NFL head coach? Get the players to execute. You said, that's a reflection of you if they're executing or not. And specifically for a guy like Gannon, this didn't have backups in there. This was you had all 11 starters, you had veteran players, and Andy Reid pans to you in these, we've watched, how many red zone snaps have you seen where a guy is that wide open, a wide receiver? That never happens at an NFL level. It's usually, all right, it's tight down here, it's harder to complete passes. There was no one near those guys. So yeah, I was kind of appalled by that. And to his point about, we did this all year, that's also not true. I remember it was the Super Bowl night, and someone, I can't remember who it was, I wish I could give credit, but they posted a clip of the Jaguars game earlier in the season where Doug Peterson basically had that exact same motion, and it led to a touchdown in the red zone. So
which is probably why the Chiefs did it. Which is probably why they did it. They didn't 100%. Just pull this out of thin air. But what he's just come off very poorly, I think, as a head coach. Yeah. And given the whole thing about the tampering, and I'd love to know, off the record, what the feeling is about him at NovaCare, and what people like Sirianni and Howie Roseman are really thinking about Jonathan Gannon now that he's gone. Because I think he got a lot of kudos when he was here because they ranked so high statistically in all these categories. I maintain that it was all against, they kind of preyed on a lot of bad teams last year, a lot of bad quarterbacks, a lot of bad offensive lines. But even so, that's kind of the way it is for most defenses. You don't go out and shut down great quarterbacks and great offensive lines week after week after week.
Right.
But even given that, his personality and his, I just wonder what they really thought about him, what they really, if there were any tears shed when he decided to leave. He took a job that nobody else kind of wanted, I think. That would be my impression. So I just wonder what his overall stature was with the Eagles at the end. So one of those things we'll know someday. Someday somebody will write a book or something, and we'll find out.
Right. Well, there were a couple of lines in that story that really stood out to me in that respect. I mean, the one was there was the line that like Gannon, and it wasn't just in Philadelphia, to be fair. It said like, you know, when he was in Indianapolis and also in Philadelphia, he would drive home and he'd be stewing at decisions that the organization made. I mean, we both have, you know, interacted and covered Howie Roseman. I don't think we need to guess really how he would feel about reading something like that, especially, you know, to Howie Roseman's credit, he gave Jonathan Gannon, like that's one of the best defenses, Howie Roseman, probably the best defense he's ever put together from a talent perspective. And to read that and be like, what is he talking about? Who he wanted more talent than I gave him. So that was one that stood out. And then you're right about Sirianni. I would frankly be livid if I were Sirianni. I mean, he went to bat for this guy over and over again. Remember, he had the one press conference where he's just, you know, calling out WIP and Angelo and just went on that rant last year about these guys are, you know, you guys are ripping Jonathan Gannon and it's wild. He's one of the best coaches in the NFL. Like really went to bat for him throughout 2 years. Never even left a little ounce of doubt that, no, this guy's doing a great job. And then Gannon had the quote in there that Sirianni's a better coach than I thought he'd be. I was like, what? Yeah. Oh my God. Like that is not a compliment. I mean, first of all, what did you think he was going to be? What, you had some thought that this guy was going to stink and you went and worked for him. And it was just it's a weird thing to say. I mean, imagine if one of your ex-coworkers said that about you, even if they're trying to compliment you. Yeah. You know, Les was a better reporter than I thought. Like you'd be like, wait, what? Hold on. I didn't know you thought I was going to be terrible. So yeah, I'm curious as you are. And the one thing I would love Sirianni to be asked on the record is just the play calling thing that you mentioned, because there's a lot of good reporters who, as you know, who cover the Eagles, and I've never heard that or read that before. It feels like that'd be something that would have come out. So maybe we'll get answers on some of this stuff, but like you said, eventually down the road, maybe we'll get kind of bigger answers.
Well, you know, and Marcus Hayes has a column today quoting league sources as saying this never happened. Okay,
I didn't see that. There you go.
Of play calling with between Sirianni and Gannon, and the way Gannon sets that up in the story is so. Nick doesn't want to do it, but you know, Jonathan convinces him to do it. Yeah, I don't see that at all. But anyway, moving on. This game this weekend, as you know, openers are so weird and funky because you haven't seen the teams and nobody knows, you know, you're assuming off of last year what people are going to be, what teams are going to be. Everybody expects the Patriots to come out running that because they don't want to get Mac Jones killed. And part of the justification of that is that the Eagles had a hard time against the run in the Super Bowl, certainly the second half of the Super Bowl, and at various times during the season. How do you see that? Is that the key with Ezekiel Elliott now and Stevenson? Are they just going to, you know, make the Eagles stop the run? Can they afford to do that against the Eagles' potent offense?
I think they'll definitely focus the game plan on we cannot afford to, like, we're not going to count on our offensive line to block these guys and have Mac Jones hold the ball. Like, I think that's probably number one bullet point on their game plan because, you know, they see what we all see, which is that they have a banged up offensive line. They've got injuries, and the Eagles' strength of their defense is obviously their pass rush. So I do think it will be partially run focused. You know, I think Ramondre Stevenson is probably their best offensive player. I think he's a really good back. I think they can run the ball with him. They are incorporating more of the run pass options with Bill O'Brien. That's been a big thing. So those might be passes, but I think they're going to be all right. Quick slants, get the ball out, screens for Mac Jones. I don't think they want him back there going through 2 or 3 reads and throwing the ball downfield. And I also think they're probably thinking, you know, that Eagles offense is pretty good. And so if we're kind of limiting the number of possessions they have, that could be a good strategy for us as well. So yeah, I would expect them run the football, quick passing game, try to limit the Eagles' offensive possessions. I do think that's how the Patriots are probably going to approach this game.
And one of the guys out there for the Patriots will be Juju Smith-Schuster, who was kind of a focus of the Super Bowl. He was the guy that James Bradbury took the penalty on that killed the Eagles, really. It took away their last chance to win the game. And then he was kind of on social media, he was kind of crowing about that a little bit. Do you think anybody remembers that for the Eagles? Do you think you'll get a little extra bump or shove somewhere along the line Sunday?
I'll be honest, I forgot about that it's a long off season. I was like, oh yeah, no, he did. Yeah, he was doing that. So you're right. Maybe, I mean, it's he's in a different situation now. You don't have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid anymore, so it's going to be a tougher go for you, Juju Smith-Schuster, than it was in that Super Bowl. But I think you're probably right. I think the players probably remember that a little bit. I know there were the reports, was it this week or last week, about Juju Smith-Schuster's knee, having the injury issue. So I don't really know what to expect from him, but he's just in a different role where, like, they don't have a very talented wide receiver group. I mean, they're really trying to put together one of these where everyone do a little and it'll add up to something that's going to look pretty good. But I mean, even in Kansas City, Travis Kelce's their number one guy. We know that. And you have a great quarterback in Mahomes. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles thought about that a little bit. We know athletes look for any motivation they can get, how silly it is or whether it's not silly or whatever. So I would imagine that'd be on their mind.
Well said. We're going to go to commercial here real quickly, Sheil. I hope you can stick around, and we'll talk to you just a little more on the other side.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back a little bit before I thought we were going to be, frankly. But here we are, Bowen on the Birds, final segment with Sheil Kapadia from The Ringer. We were talking about the matchups this weekend. I look back at openers that I've covered, and one of the things I always liked to do at the end of the regular season, when you have to write a whole bunch of stuff, one of the things I would like to do is to go back to the opener. And what did I write about the opener? What did we see in that game? Was there anything that was a portent of, sometimes there wasn't. Sometimes, it was a great opener and they had a terrible year. But often there would be something, some element of the game that was a theme throughout the year. And one of the things I'm kind of looking at this Sunday is what the Eagles do with the Patriots tight ends. They have Gesicki and they have Hunter Henry, and we don't know. The Eagles linebacking core is very unproven at this point, and we don't know how they're going to. The safeties also are kind of new, and we're not really sure how they're going to cover tight ends. That's one of the things that, in looking ahead to the rest of the year, that I want to see Sunday. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. It's kind of the spine of the defense, as the football people like to say, the linebackers and the safeties. I mean, those are the big question marks on this defense. And so I think in coverage specifically, like you mentioned, that's going to be a big key. That we know, like you said, they're going to throw to the tight ends. They've got 2 tight ends. They added one this offseason. I think they're going to work that short intermediate part of the field. I think when you looked at Mac Jones a couple of years ago in his rookie season, when he played better than I expected for sure. He was very accurate in the short when he has time and guys are open. He doesn't miss a lot of throws in that area of the field. So I don't know how the Eagles are going to match up. Are they going to play more man coverage than they did a year ago? Are they going to mix up different personnel packages? I think Nakobe Dean is definitely a spotlighted player for me this week for some of the reasons we already talked about. I mean, one is stopping the run. Ramondre Stevenson's a physical back. How's Nakobe Dean going to hold up? The run pass options, a lot of times those are keyed on one linebacker. What's his first move, and can we take advantage of him? So I think he's going to be a spot in the spotlight there. And then to your point, covering those tight ends. So this isn't one where the linebackers are going to be able to hide, and we're going to, I think, look at the end of the game and say, we didn't really notice them out there. I think we'll notice them one way or the other, whether they play well and have a debut that has everyone really excited that, hey, the Eagles for the first time in a while have a young linebacker who fans can get excited about, or whether it's the opposite and this might still be kind of an issue from previous years. So, I think that's definitely something as we look ahead to the rest of the season to keep an eye on.
Thank you very much. That's very good. Looking at this game, I was also struck by the Patriots' defense was good last year. It really was. I mean, their offense was the problem. They were 8-9. It wasn't like they were 4-13 or something.
Yeah.
Can this defense? What does it do well? What do you think it can do well against the Eagles? Where will it give the Eagles trouble?
Yeah, I think there's two areas. One is their edge rushers are really good. Matthew Judon and Josh Uche, who is a younger player. Both those guys had a bunch of sacks last year. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think the Patriots were top 3, top 5 in sacks last year. And those are the two guys who really set the tone. So they don't just kind of line up with 4 and say, here's how we're going to rush the passer. They'll stunt and show you different looks where that communication up front has to be really good. So someone like Cam Jurgens, starting for the first time at guard, presumably, that communication has to be really good. And I thought as good as the Eagles offensive line was last year, there were certain weeks where you looked at it and said, all right, Jordan Mailata is having trouble with this specific type of edge rusher, or Mailata and Landon Dickerson, they didn't really handle some of those things that were thrown their way in terms of communication and passing stuff off really well. So I think that's one area where I'm going to be keeping an eye on in terms of the Eagles offensive line versus that pass rush. And then the Patriots secondary, their whole defense is really intact from last year, except for one guy, Devin McCourty, their free safety, who's been there forever. But their cornerbacks, I mean, those guys, they'll play 6 defensive backs. They'll play 7 defensive backs. And so they're really deep and versatile there. And so I like the Eagles' chances, obviously, with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith pretty much every week. You'll like their chances. But I do think the Patriots have pretty good players in their secondary where they'll say, all right, can we force Jalen Hurts to hold on to the football a little bit for our pass rush to get home?
Yeah, and they have that rookie corner, Gonzalez. I think he's supposed to be really – but, there was a time when even if a rookie corner was high first round, you still went after him because he was a rookie corner. But I guess the college game has evolved to the point where that's not quite as big a deal as it used to be. That's the sense I get anyhow.
Yeah, I think corner and wide receiver, we've seen kind of a shift. Before even it was like, wow, this wide receiver had 1,000 yards. I mean, you could go to the Pro Football Reference page and say, oh, this has only been done 3 times, 5 times. Yeah. And now it just feels like at those positions, whether it's because of more 7-on-7 as players are coming up, I don't know, but corners and wide receivers come in and can play really well. I mean, I think Sauce Gardner on the Jets last year was a great example where he came in and was like one of the best corners in the NFL right away. So I think the Patriots are counting on that. Gonzalez slipped a little further than maybe, he was projected to in the draft, but who knows with draft prospects, but he seemed like a good player to me. So yeah, I think he's someone they're counting on right away for sure.
It's an odd opener. I can't remember an Eagles-Patriots opener before. I know I never covered one. I don't know if that's ever happened. Usually they often played the Patriots in the preseason, and they did joint practices with them one year, or a couple years actually. And, regular season games tended to be like in November, it seemed like to me. So I don't have a reference point for a Belichick opener. I don't know what he usually does, whether his teams are ready to come out and, hit the ground running, or whether he needs some time. But it's going to be real interesting. And, I think with the Eagles having to play again 4 nights later against a good Minnesota team here at the Link, I think a little more important than you might normally think to get off with a win. How do you see the game? Have you made a prediction yet?
Yeah, I'm with you. It is a weird game to get a handle on. Like, it's not a division game. It's not a conference game. It's not against like an AFC powerhouse where if they were facing like the Bills, or the Bengals now, you'd be like, all right, this, a lot of juice for this game. It's sort of a weird, you're facing the Patriots. The Eagles fans obviously hate the Patriots, a long history there. But at the same time, this isn't the old Patriots teams where you're saying this is a great team. They're going to Foxborough and are favored, which, obviously has not happened in the Belichick era. So I think it could be a little bit of a sort of strange, uneven, I don't think it's going to be a game basically like we sat down last year and watched the Eagles, and it felt like every week you're at halftime and go, I don't think it's supposed to be that easy, where they're just going up and down the field more so than really any other Eagles team I've ever seen. I don't think it's going to be that type of game. I think it could be a little back and forth. It could be close in the first half. I do kind of like the Eagles in this game eventually to, I don't know if pull away is even the right word, maybe win by 6 or 7 points. I think I said 26-20, something like that. There just really is a big talent disparity, in my opinion. I mean, the Patriots defense is very good, but man, if you just go position by position, which team has the edge, you're going to give the Eagles the edge in most categories. And I think with Hurts, the Eagles have such an advantage that he just sets the tone. Like, you kind of don't worry about them coming out flat or not being prepared. The coach has kind of an easy job, not an easy job, but an easier job on the Eagles than usual, because the quarterback is just the guy that everybody follows and takes their cues from. So, I think I like the Eagles to win this game, but I think maybe it'll be a little bit closer than a lot of those games we watched last year.
Yeah, in fact, my score is like 25-22. I'm not sure they'll cover, but I'm often wrong, so we'll see. But,
me too.
Before I let you go, I want to discuss special teams, and I think this is a good time to discuss that because we're faced with Bill Belichick, who loves special teams. Ben Volin, whom I had on before you, actually asked Bill a question this week about long snapping and got one of those 20-minute answers about the history of long snapping going back to the Romans. This is juxtaposed against the Eagles, who, in my view, other than field goal kicking, the Eagles seem to have somehow de-emphasized special teams. I don't understand it. I know they've changed some rules so that they don't want you to run back kicks and stuff, but week after week after week last season, I saw special teams blunders that could have been disastrous if the talent level had not been what it was, and they just kept doing this. Then they got to the Super Bowl and gave up a huge punt return and had a disastrous shank punt of their own. And nothing has really changed in those areas, it seems to me. What do you make of this? Is Howie Roseman kind of forgotten about special teams? Does Nick Sirianni not think they're important? What is going on here?
Yeah, I've never really been able to get a good grasp on whether a team's special teams is going to be good or not. Every coach will say, no, this is important to us, and we believe in it and we practice it. But we just go by what we see on the field. And it's like some of the teams are really consistent. The Ravens, I know a lot of it's Justin Tucker, but it's not just Justin Tucker. They're the one team that you can look at since John Harbaugh's been there, their special teams are awesome every year. And I'm with you. The Eagles had their special teams last year. They weren't good, but you looked at it and said, am I nitpicking here? They're winning these games by 20 points. I don't want to, I'm not going to, lead some type of content with the special teams aren't good when they're blowing teams out. But to your point, it really did come back to bite them on the biggest stage. So I look at it and I'm like, there's got to be 32 good kickers in the world. There's got to be 32 good punters in the world. And they're good at kicker, but at punter, that's a question mark. In the return game, that's a question mark. They had penalties. They had blunders last year. Is that are we committing enough practice time to it type deal? Because it is a good roster. It's not like the back end of the roster. It's, a bunch of guys who other teams don't want. So you would think the talent is there. So special teams, I've just never been able to, as much as I try to wrap my head around all these different aspects of football, I kind of go into seasons like I have no idea other than whether the kicker is going to be good. And even then, sometimes the kicker is great one year, and then all of a sudden he gets the yips the next year. But I think you're right to bring it up. I think if this game specifically is very close, or if the Eagles do get upset, and you had to ask me, what are we talking about Sunday night or Monday morning, I would think that would be a talking point where we'd say, all right, we didn't really talk about special teams going in, but man, they made that big mistake in a key spot. It led to a loss. This goes back to last year. They've got to get this fixed right away. So, I'm with you there.
Yeah, and I'm really eager to see what they do. They don't have – the active roster doesn't have a punter or a returner. Everybody – I guess Michael Clay sort of hinted today that they'll do what they did last year, but the possibility's there that they won't, I guess. Well, anyway, that is it for today's Bowen on the Birds. really appreciate Sheil Kapadia joining me, and I really look forward to reading his writing and listening to his talking on The Ringer. And I hope someday we can do this again. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Sheil.